Welcome back to the Med-Gym. This is David Drinks with another Technique Tuesday for you. In our last couple Technique Tuesdays, we've talked about rowing technique. Specifically, two common flaws that we see in most people's rowing technique when they go to just start performing a rowing exercise. And so the first one we talked about was overusing the upper traps and shrugging your rows and not having good balance between the low, mid traps and the upper traps. In the second week of our Technique Tuesday series on rowing form, we talked about not hyperextending the shoulder and causing it to dive behind the body as you do your rows. And so those two are some of the most common ones that we see. But a third technique flaw that we see with a row or even a pressing exercise that we'll talk about today is not giving yourself enough space between your elbow and your body. So what that looks like generally is most people go to row and they go here and they come right in, elbow next to their side. And this feels like a safe position. It's close to their body. But the common flaw that we see is that we're not giving ourselves enough space and room for the shoulder blade to actually move. So we want to go about 45 degrees out away from the body with that elbow. And so we give our shoulder enough space to move and we give our shoulder blade enough room to retract. The problem that we usually see when someone sets up and they're rowing and they're going too narrow with their body is, number one, it doesn't give their shoulder blade enough room to move. So if we get out a little bit away from your side, the elbow out about a 45-degree angle, now we're getting a little more of a 360 type motion at the shoulder blade. So that shoulder blade is really now coming and being able to retract towards the spine and then protract around the rib cage. If we go too narrow, we're really just taking the shoulder blade into a much more limited range of motion, and you're overusing some of the structures right on the shoulder. So we want to make sure that as we row, we're giving the shoulder blade enough room to move. And we're also not coming too narrow, which forces that dip forward that we talked about last week. So giving yourself that 45-degree angle tends to engage more of the muscles around the shoulder. It gives your shoulder blade enough room to move and make sure that you're not letting that dip forward at the shoulder happen that we talked about last week. Now, the same technique flaw can happen in pushing motions as well as pulling motions. So we tend to see this same kind of pattern of not getting the elbows out to the side and not giving enough space both when we're pulling and when we see people pressing. So for example, if we go through a push-up exercise and you're getting your elbows too narrow, you're not going to be able to move the shoulder blades properly and keep the shoulders in a good, healthy pressing position. So for example, if I get down here on the ground, if I'm going too narrow, elbows right at my side, I'm going to get to the bottom and tend to drop my shoulders forward and not be able to use the muscles around the shoulder and the shoulder blade properly. So getting out to the side, 45-degree angle with the shoulders, and pressing from there is going to put me in a lot better position to then use those muscles of the chest and keep the shoulders healthy as I'm going through a pressing exercise. And don't just think about this in horizontal pressing and pulling either, but also when we go to vertical pressing or pulling, the same idea still applies. So a lot of times, even in a more narrow grip pull-up or chin-up type setup, if people are getting too narrow with the elbows to their side, they're going to end up diving forward into that forward rolled shoulder position and just not be able to use the lat muscles quite as effectively as they go through a chin-up or pull-up. So if I jump up here on the rack, you'll see too narrow versus too wide and the difference that puts me in. So too narrow, diving the shoulders forward, versus out to the side, where we get a little more space to be able to pull down and engage those lat muscles. So keep that in mind as you're not only pressing and pulling horizontally, but as you're doing any kind of vertical pull or an overhead press, that you're just giving your elbow a little bit of space away from your body to clear the shoulder, to get the shoulder blade moving well, and to also use all of the muscles around the shoulder, the upper back, and the chest. So that'll do it for this week's Technique Tuesday. Keep in mind, not getting too narrow with your pressing or pulling, getting a little bit out to the side so you can properly move the shoulder blades, properly use the muscles around the shoulder, and stay tuned for more Technique Tuesdays coming up soon.